All right, well, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with the webinar for today. And just want to again thank everybody for taking some time out of your schedules to join us. Hang on one second. All right. Again, yeah, just want to thank everybody for joining us today. I know that everybody has a lot of things on their plate, so we're certainly honored that you would take a few minutes to hear a little bit about SimplyHome and what we do. Just a couple of kind of housekeeping notes. You should have on your screen, you should be able to see our screen. If you can't, certainly let us know. And you can do that using that window. So if you look on your toolbar, you should see the chat window available to do that. Just type in there, let us know if you're having any issues. But also if you have some questions along the way, feel free to jump in there and ask some questions and we can address them in there. I think everybody who's attending is muted at this point. So if you're trying to speak, no one can hear you on this end. So use that chat window to ask any questions that you might have right now. So without further ado, want to introduce the other folks on the line. First of all, my name is Jason Ray. I'm with SimplyHome, but today I have the folks from FeelSafe Technology Consulting. We have Sabrina Cardinal, along with Ron Little and Henry. What's your last name, Henry?
Wyatt.
Wyatt, that's right. So I don't know if you guys want to introduce yourself, but let you take it away for a second.
Yeah, this is Ron Little, and I'm here in Juneau with FeelSafe Technology Consulting. Glad to be here.
And I'm Sabrina Cardinal. I'm here in Juneau, and I'm one of the co-owners with Henry and Ron for FeelSafe Technologies. And we were working on and working with SimplyHome and working on getting technology for individuals that we served when we all were employed at Reach, and we decided that we wanted to expand our ventures and be able to open up possibilities. So we started FeelSafe Technology Consulting.
And I'm Henry Wyatt. I guess I'm the Anchorage branch of FeelSafe Consulting. So I'm up north here in the interior. Worked with Ron and Sabrina for a couple of years there at Reach and enjoyed the work we were doing, trying to get technology into people's homes. So we sort of decided to branch out on our own and start our own thing. So we're pretty excited about that and pretty excited to be working with SimplyHome again.
Well, thank you guys. And one thing that we wanted to talk about as we got started with this is just the fact that SimplyHome, we're a national provider of technology services and supports, but through our partnership with FeelSafe, we now have a local presence in Alaska for not only completing assessments, but also installing and supporting technology all across the state. So we feel really excited and fortunate about that partnership, and hopefully that's a good resource for all of those who are joining us today to have that connection with Sabrina and Henry and Ron to, again, support whatever enabling technology needs you might have there right in your own backyard. So now just kind of wanted to jump into the presentation and start sharing a little bit about who we are, what we do, and what this thing called enabling technology really is. And, SimplyHome as an organization has been around for quite a while. We have over 15 years of experience in providing enabling technology to individuals, families, and agencies all across the country. We got started as a long-term care service provider, and we've been doing that for almost 3 decades now, where about 15 years ago, we saw a need in the services that we were providing to come up with new solutions, not necessarily meaning that we were going to provide a lower level of support or a different level of support, but we just really thought we needed to provide some new outcomes for individuals so that the answer for every issue that we faced wasn't more people or wasn't, no, you can't become more independent. And that's really what we've been focusing on with our technology over the last 15 years is, can we create new opportunities for individuals that we support so that they can do things that they might not otherwise be able to do on their own? And can we create some new efficiencies for providers and families and individuals in the types of supports that they're providing. It might just look a little bit different using technology. We are based out of Asheville, North Carolina. We have another office in Green Bay, Wisconsin, but we have, again, a national reach, and we already have a presence in Alaska through our partnership with FeelSafe. We hope that can expand and we can reach more people across the state. So one of the things that I just wanted to kind of start our conversation with is just having an understanding about what we're really talking about when we start talking about technology and where our focus should really lie. And that should be on the outcomes that the technology creates and not the specific products and pieces to get there. So if you came here today hoping to see a product demo and see some cool shiny objects, we'll talk about some great outcomes, but you might be a little disappointed that we're not going to have flashy iPad apps and things on the screens talking about specific products. We're really going to focus on what possibilities can be achieved with technology and how some of those outcomes can be created. If you look at the technology pieces that are on the screen right now, the reason those are all there is because those are pieces of technology that have both been created and become obsolete in our lifetimes. And so if we focus on specific pieces and products, those may or may not be the solutions that we use a month from now or 6 months from now or a year from now. So we really think that it's not the best approach if we say, hey, this iPad is going to do all these cool things, because that iPad ends up becoming the solution for everything. And you're really missing that person-centered approach. You're taking more of a device-centered approach when you do that. So we want to focus on the outcomes that we're trying to create and not the specific parts and pieces to do that. And then also understanding this idea of the dignity of risk. And so one of the things that we really think is important is, again, creating those opportunities for independence, allowing individuals to potentially take on some new challenges that may have risk associated with them. But can we use technology as a tool to help mitigate that risk in some ways so that that connection still exists? An example would be, if we're trying to support someone in their cooking, and maybe they haven't had a lot of experience in cooking independently on their own, it's probably not a great solution to just say, hey, go figure it out. So can we use technology to know that somebody started cooking so that we can provide that support once they've made the choice and decided, yes, I want to go and start cooking? That's a way that technology can still allow for choice and independence, but still provide that connection to whoever's supporting that individual in an effective and timely way. And then next, just want to introduce this idea of enabling technology. If you look at the definition that's on the screen right now, that's actually the definition of assistive technology that was defined by the federal government over 20 years ago. And the reason that we've really gravitated towards the term enabling technology is because it does have more of a person-centered approach and mindset to it. If you think about assisting someone, that really has the perspective of the caregiver in mind. We're going to go assist someone in doing this, instead of looking at it in terms of how we can enable new opportunities, how we can enable choice, how can we enable self-determination for an individual. And if we look at it from that perspective, we think we're going to be much more successful in the solutions that we can provide. So it doesn't mean that the definition is wrong, but if we use terms, from the proper perspective, we feel like that's going to help us really get to where we want to be. And finally, before we really jump into what the technology is and how it works, this quote really stood out to us, one that we found a couple of years ago, and it's just kind of a great reminder for all of us as we start thinking about technology and how it might apply to people that we support. And if we think about all that technology does in each one of our lives, from simple reminders on our phones so that we know to get to meetings, to making sure that we can get where we're going, following GPS on our phones or wherever. It really makes our life a lot easier. But when you think about those things in the life of a person with a disability, for example, it can really create new opportunities and new possibilities in their life. So that, if this individual was never able to open and close a door on their own, or change the channel on the TV, or turn on a light, or cook independently, or access their medications properly. Things that seem really simple in a lot of ways, but if someone has differing abilities, they may or may not be able to do some of those things. So can technology create some of those possibilities in new and different ways? So now with kind of that background and knowledge, we're going to really get into what enabling technology is, go through some examples. And if you have any questions along the way, again, feel free to jump into that chat box and we can dig a little bit deeper into some of those topics as well. So in terms of thinking about what enabling technology is, what you see on the screen, you see lots of different forms of technology, some that are commercially available, like a Nest thermostat or an Amazon Echo, and some that are much more specific to an individual that we might support who has different needs or abilities, like a medication dispenser, for example. So one of the things that we think is really important is understanding that enabling technology doesn't have to be some specific thing. Oftentimes when we start thinking about enabling or assistive technology, we think it, is really specific to someone with a disability. It has to be, this wheelchair or this communication device. No, there's all kinds of great commercially available technology that can support individuals in different ways that we can really leverage to provide some really cool and unique outcomes. So, just kind of broaden your thinking a little bit about what the possibilities really are. We were actually speaking with a provider a couple of months ago, back over the summer, and we were talking to one of their program managers, and she said, well, I have a Nest thermostat in my house and I have an Amazon Echo, but it never even dawned on me that this could really apply to people that we support. So again, just broadening our perspective a little bit to think about what some of those possibilities are is really important. So when we start looking at what technology could be available to support someone, these are kind of the basic tenets that we follow as we go through that process. Could this technology create opportunities for independence and self-determination and choice for an individual? So, if we're using a Nest thermostat and we have an individual with a spinal cord injury, obviously, a typical just standard thermostat may or may not be something that they can effectively interact with to control the temperature in their house. But there's all kinds of ways using some of this smart technology to give that person the ability to make those choices on their own and not rely on somebody else to just go and adjust the temperature when they're a little hot or a little cold. Sometimes it's having oversight and knowledge of different activities that's really important. So, knowing if somebody has started cooking in the example that we gave earlier, has somebody access their medication on the right time, has somebody just gotten up in the morning to make sure that they're on task and on schedule to do the things that they need to do for the day, so that we can properly support that in real time. And we'll talk about how caregiving can mix into that and blend into that in just a minute. It's pretty obvious that if we have better, more accurate, more timely information, we can make better decisions. So one of the benefits through the use of technology, we can have that more reliable, more timely information, so we can be more proactive in the care that we provide. If we're trying to respond to events based off of information from last week, last month, yesterday, whenever it was, it's probably not going to be the most effective way that we could do that. If we can get that information now within seconds of someone not accessing their medication or a blood sugar reading that's out of range or whatever the case might be, it's going to be much more effective. And then also understanding that the needs of every person are going to be different. So if you think back to one of the first slides, we started talking about having that outcome-based approach. That's really important. Again, the needs of every person are going to be different. So the technology has to be flexible and customizable to meet those needs. There is no off-the-shelf, one-size-fits-all kind of solution when we start talking about enabling technology. It really has to be flexible and adaptable to meet whatever needs and challenges that we face for that individual. And also, these are not things that are obtrusive. They should be discreet. They should respect the privacy of the individual. So, when we start talking about the utilization of technology, there's a lot of things that it's not. And we're going to talk in just a second about some of the ethical applications of technology that go along with that. And then, with the goal of, providing peace of mind. And that's oftentimes just thought of from a caregiving perspective, but also looking at it from that individual's perspective as well. and this concept of being able to provide support 24/7 that we're going to talk about right now. So just thinking about how technology can really integrate in with the care that somebody receives is important. So first of all, understanding that using technology doesn't mean it's replacing care. That care and that support is really important to be blended in and connected with any technology supports that that person might be receiving. They're not disparate things. It's not, oh, we have this technology over here, and we're still going to be providing, the support that we always have. It's what are ways that we can use technology to create some unique outcomes, and maybe that means that we change the way we're providing support for that individual. So this idea of, can we provide support, when it's really necessary, instead of just in case? How many people are being supported right now just because of something that may have happened a year, 2, 3 years ago? And now we have 24/7 one-on-one with that individual, just in case this thing happens again. Well, can technology help fill that void and provide that connection so that if that thing does happen, that we can support it now in real time, but we're not providing, someone there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, just in case it happens. And then also this idea that, we need to engage current familiar caregivers. And that's going to look different for every person, but can we engage natural supports? Can we engage person that are already on that individual support team? So we're not talking about, taking this technology and having somebody across the country watching somebody do something. No, it's how can we, again, engage that person's support team in a different way, and how can technology play a role in that? And then this idea of making sure that technology is ethically applied. So there's so many things that are technically possible from using cameras and all kinds of crazy things that can be done. But should it really be applied in each application? Obviously, that's going to be different for every person that's supported, but understanding the difference between something that's technically possible and what's ethically appropriate is really important. So knowing where those boundaries are and understanding what the technology is going to be used for and how it works is vitally important in the success. And if all that is done right, hopefully we can start to shift the mindset in the care that's being provided away from doing for someone, and how can we support them to make sure that we are allowing them to live the life that they want to live. And that's really the goal through the use of technology. So what we're going to do now is we're going to hear a couple of stories and talk about some examples, and hopefully that'll just give you some context to what the technology really is and how it's going to work. So we're first going to hear a story about David. Then I'm going to allow Henry and Sabrina and Ron to share some stories about individuals that they've supported already using technology. And then we'll talk about specific pieces of technology and how they've created outcomes for David and for others. So without further ado, here's David.
Hi. Where we started with this journey was when he was a baby. We just never took no for an answer. We had a pediatrician who told us that the only person who would limit David is us. And so we decided when he was 2 weeks old that we would not limit him in his destiny.
Petrolapians, all petrolapians, trophies.
On paper, it looks like he has a lot of limitation, but in reality, he's able to do everything that he puts his mind to. It's just a little bit differently. When he graduated, of course, the expectation was that he would have his own place. And I was scared. I didn't know how we were going to make that work. And I was the obstacle because I didn't know how he could do it without a roommate, and I didn't know how it was going to work. Actually, the coordinator for his program at Western, she started helping us advocate with his care coordinator with Smoky Mountain Mental Health to get a system for him so he would not need a full-time live-in. And it's worked beautifully. There's sensors all over this apartment, and if a door opens, it'll let me know that a door opens when I'm not expecting the door to open. And it respects his privacy, but allows me that peace of mind to know that he is moving around and everything's well.
David, close and lock your front door.
The verbal prompting is basically what we did was we looked at the different areas in his routine that he needed to be prompted on. And we modeled the routine, his daily schedule around the prompting.
I said, David, lights out, CPAP on.
Yeah.
David, wake up. David, fix my breakfast.
The other piece is that I can track him through the computer, through the routine, whether I know it's prompting him or not. So if I get the wheelies in the morning, like, has he started his breakfast yet? I can log in without having to aggravate him and annoy him with phone calls. He has created a lot of his own destiny by his willingness to take risk and my willingness to allow him to take risk. He networked and got his own job over in Graham County at the EMS base. And the people love him, and he does a great job. And I think about how if I had been there hovering, worrying about, oh, is he going to do it properly? Is he going to make a mistake? Are the people going to accept him? He would still be sitting at home every day. Or he'd be sitting, in a place where he's not satisfied. And so I think it's so vitally important that those of us who do not live in the disability world give our fellow human beings who just happen to have a disability the option to make their own choice, and for us to support that. When we don't support it, then we are creating a destiny for them that they don't want, and that's not fair.
That was just a little bit to hopefully share some of the outcomes and possibilities that can be achieved using technology. But Henry, Sabrina, or Ron, do any of you guys want to speak to some of the experiences you guys have had?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few individuals in particular that we launched technology for them through SimplyHome, and one gentleman has Down syndrome, nonverbal, lived on his own, and he spent from the age 0 to 18 institutionalized. So it was a really big deal after, years of gaining that independence and being able to live on his own, to stay living on his own. He's in his 50s, and it came a time to where his heart stopped beating for 61 seconds. He needed a pacemaker. And so we started worrying about, how would we know if he fell? He's not going to be able to pick up a phone and tell us. How do we know if he's safe in his home, if he falls down, if he's sleeping well, and things like that? And trying to think outside of the box with the SimplyHome system. And we were able to implement to where he's able to stay in his home. There was question of whether he should go to a group home, if he'd be safer there, if he'd be more comfortable there. And with being able to implement the SimplyHome technology and be able to collect the real data that he was, in fact, sleeping well in his bed, he was safe. We were able to monitor the falls, such as putting motion sensors and realizing where he was, being able to set the system to where, if there wasn't motion for a few minutes, that we'd get an alert. We would know if something happened. And we were able to, make sure that if he left his stove on, or if staff left his stove on, that he wouldn't be able to tell us that we would get that real-time information. When it came time to look at his plan of care, and really with his medical needs and him not being able to even navigate to his care throughout the day alone to where he can get himself food or he can get himself snacks. He just wouldn't do it. We wanted to really think about how could we increase the quality of care of his life along with the services that he got, because we didn't want to have to ask for more hours because of all the different cuts, and we wanted to really be creative with his care. So we were able to implement the package, and it was pretty affordable. It was under $3,000. And it came to the time that we started looking at the data, and it really, the guardian from Office of Public Advocacy, his care coordinator, his whole team started looking at it going, you know what? We're able to track everything he does in this home that we feel comfortable with. So they decided, let's not put him in a group home. This is not what he wants. He was able to stay at home. When it came time to, should we ask for an increase of care? We were able to remain with the same amount of care he had from previous years, even though it was recommended by his medical provider that maybe he should have more increased care. But we were able to supplement some of that in order to keep him safe in the home, to make sure that we would know if something happened. And he was happy that he didn't have to be transferred. I mean, being institutionalized till the age of 18, he wanted to be in his own space. And he makes it very clear, even if he's not able to speak. So that was a great being able to submit that data in the plan of care, being able to show his guardian and the care coordinator, look, you know, he's not wandering, he's at home, things are going well, we can see all this data, and it just made everybody at ease. And he's still at home, he's still aging in place where he wants to be, and that data is still being able to be collected. We have another gentleman that with severe anxiety. He's not able to, he doesn't understand time. He doesn't understand that, you know, it's okay. Your caregiver will be there at bright 7 o'clock in the morning. You won't be alone, but he does own his own condo. He lives on his own. And so he didn't have the support at night. And he wasn't going to qualify to meet that level of care to be able to get that support at night. So we wanted to think about how could we support him after hours when staff leave at 9 p.m. and they don't return till 7 a.m. We started seeing he had such severe anxiety that he would start calling random numbers and people would get angry and try to track him down. And he would do this obsessively all through the night. He would do his laundry when he wasn't supposed to because it was too loud all through the night, because it was just part of him and how he dealt with his anxiety. He would wander to his neighbors and tell them that he was choking or had a medical emergency. And of course, they thought they were being helpful, and they would stick him in a cab or they would send him to the hospital, and we had no idea. And he wasn't able to call us and say, hey, I'm at the hospital. Luckily we live in a small community that I ended up getting a phone call a few hours later saying that he was waiting for his ride at the ER, and they had recognized him and remembered that he was getting services from us. He would open up his electrical box and shut down all the power, and this would be the dead of winter, and he'd be sitting in the dark and the cold, and he didn't have the connection of turning it back on. He was done. So we really wanted to be able to put his mind at ease and figure out how we can make that time frame from when the staff aren't there more successful. Where if he wandered, how would we deal with that? What direction would we go? Would we know, we didn't know who put him in the cab. We were getting complaints from the landlords and the neighbors that he was being too loud at night with his washer and dryer and stuff. So we decided that working with SimplyHome after our assessment, and they really walked through, well, what's the concern? What do you want to see as a goal? What does he want to see as a goal for himself? And really involved what would make him feel better. And so we were able to put sensors on his phone that just say after hours, hey, so-and-so, please, it's after hours. If it's not an emergency, please don't use the phone. Or, hey, it's after hours, be safe, stay in your home, don't go out and wander. Have sensors that say if he opens up his power box that says, hey, please keep this shut at all times. If he tried to do laundry, just give him that simple reminder, you know, can you please wait till staff arrive to do your laundry? And that really would give him that real-time reminder that, you know, once his anxiety kicked in and he had the butler system being able to speak to him and just give him that friendly reminder and say, okay, I need to step back a minute. And we really started seeing successes. We could look at the data and we'd get the alerts, and we'd be able to look and say, I could look at the data and really see when he was struggling that night, because it would affect his behavior the next day. So us as staff would be able to say, okay, we know that he's going to be having more anxiety today. He didn't get a lot of sleep last night, or he was really up and at it, and we need to tread a little lighter today. But it also limited the fact that he was calling so many people. He was calling 411 obsessively, ringing up his own bill. It minimized the amount of times he went to his neighbor's house. And it also put kind of security for him too, that a neighbor wasn't just putting him in a taxi cab and sending him off and not admitting who it was. So we could really see the safety features of it for him. And we asked him, how do you feel about this system? And he felt good that somebody was there watching him, or that he felt like he had a connection to the outside world, that he wasn't just there alone in his apartment. And he knew that if something was going to go wrong, somebody would know about it.
That's awesome, Sabrina. Thanks for sharing that. And so 1 second. All right. So what I want to do next is just, you know, kind of talk about, you know, David, who we saw just a minute ago, and talk about some of the outcomes and things that are supported for David, and talk about the technology that was utilized to help create some of those outcomes. So one of the things that you didn't see in the video was the fact that David has to get up in the morning. And you saw him go to his job, but he actually takes public transportation, as you saw him getting off the bus to get to that job. And so he has to be up by a certain time in the morning and has to have, you know, gotten breakfast and gotten dressed and all those things we all have to do to get to our jobs every day. And so, you know, it's really important for him to be up and be on time. And he has a regular alarm clock, just like, you know, most people, but it's also really easy to hit that snooze bar a couple times. So one of the concerns that, you know, was present for David was just making sure that, you know, if he was going to be taking his public transportation, that he was going to be able to complete these tasks in the morning properly. So he has technology in his bed so that it knows if he's in or out of bed. And if he gets up on time when he's supposed to, great, nothing happens. And in terms of reminders or alerts, that's obviously tracked so that if reports need to be run and to look at how well he's doing in terms of his goals, that can be done. But the only time that there's any intervention is when an exception is identified. So if David is not out of bed by a certain time and he should be, he's going to get a reminder prompt, you know, one of the prompts that you heard, to remind him to get out of bed. And that's going to happen a couple of times. And if he still doesn't get out of bed, if he ignores those prompts, then a message is going to go to his mom. And, you know, nobody wants mom getting that message that, you know, you haven't done what you're supposed to and gotten up in the morning. So David is given that opportunity first a couple of times to manage the situation. But again, he still has that connection there with the people who care about him to provide that support. But it's only when it's necessary and only when it's appropriate. Also, another need for David was making sure that he was taking his medications properly and on time, and were they organized, and how would he know which ones to take. So he uses a medication dispenser. You saw a picture of it a few slides ago that dispenses medications on a regular schedule. They're organized and filled ahead of time. And the system is going to start alerting him when it's time to take the medication. And it's going to dispense the meds that are due at that time. And if he takes it, again, great. The system is going to track that, and you're going to be able to see that history. But if he hasn't accessed it after a certain amount of time, that's an exception the system has identified, and now it's going to do something. It's going to call him and give him a reminder. It's going to alert somebody on his care team to let them know so that they can follow up and provide that response. But again, it's only when you know, it's needed. One of the real concerns that his mom had was some of the safety aspects with who's coming and going from his home. So is someone going to recognize that David is potentially vulnerable and try and take advantage of the situation? Or is David going to get anxious and, potentially, have a concern and leave the house at 2 o'clock in the morning? So we put technology in place to know, first of all, if any of the exterior doors or windows open, and if it was before or after a certain time of day, alerts would go out to his care team to let them know, hey, this may need to be addressed. But he also has a video doorbell system so that whoever is coming and going from his home, that information can be sent to, again, anybody in his care team so that they know who's coming and going. Is this person somebody that's trusted and should be there? Again, it just provides that connection and peace of mind and comfort for David and for his care team. Also, this idea of just being able to call for help. There was a concern that, in one of those times when David might be anxious, would he remember to pick up the phone, and would he remember who to call and how to do all that? So he just has a really simple button that he presses if he needs something. It's not going to 911. No ambulances are showing up or anything like that. It's just going to people in his care team, and they're getting alerts by phone call, email, or text message to say, hey, David might need some support right now. And then they can provide the support that's appropriate at that time. It could be going over there, it could be trying to call them, whatever. But it gives him that good, easy way to connect with people on his team. Also, cooking supports. So, David does prepare some meals and things on his own. And so knowing if he's started cooking or if he's left the stove on for an extended period of time, I think Sabrina alluded to that in one of her examples as well. So if the stove has been left on for an hour, now let's either give David a prompt to remind him to turn it off, or get that message to somebody who's supporting David so that they can help redirect the situation before it becomes a bigger issue. Could also be if, the stove is on and David's not in the kitchen for 10 minutes. Maybe that's something that, is a concern, and, that can be supported with technology as well. And then as you saw in the video, there's lots of other just general tasks throughout the day that David is supported by technology, making sure that he's put his CPAP on when he's going to bed, and that he's getting his breakfast in the morning, and those kinds of things. So just, again, make sure that he's staying on task and doing what he needs to do to be successful for the day. So we talked a lot about, some needs that, someone like David might be able to use technology to help them in their daily lives, but want to talk about, somebody who might have some physical limitations and how technology might be able to support them. So this is Jonathan. Jonathan had a spinal cord injury. And so he uses some technology similar to what David has. So some sensors and things that can help connect him to his care team and can help make sure that he gets the support that he needs when he needs it. But a lot of the other technology that he has really helps him make the choices that he wants to make and really have control over his home. So after Jonathan's injury, he went back and was being cared for by his family in their home, which wasn't what he wanted. He was a young guy in his early 20s and wanted to be independent. And it was really cost prohibitive for his family. I mean, they were bringing in 24/7 care, even though it was in their own home. He had a level of need that they didn't think that they could support, and they were bringing in 24/7 care around the clock. And, it just wasn't financially sustainable for them. And so not only was Jonathan able to become more independent and transition into his own place, but the technology allowed him to not have to have somebody with him 24 hours a day. He was able to go back to school, get his undergraduate degree, and really just get the support when he needed it. Getting up in the morning, making sure he was got his lunch in the middle of the day, and got to the different activities and things that he needed to do throughout the day. And then also, got to bed and all that kind of stuff in the evening. But the rest of the time, he was pretty independent, in the overnight and different periods throughout the day. If he needed to go out, he had the ability a couple different ways to open and close doors and turn lights on and off and change the channel on his TV, all based off of, his level of ability. And so those were really great tools to help him maximize, his independence in his life. We've talked a little bit about some of the specific daily activities that can be supported with technology, but there's lots of other ways that technology can help do that as well. So this is Pearlie. Pearlie's someone that we support actually here in North Carolina or South Carolina, excuse me. But one of the things that was recognized for Pearlie as she was transitioning to become more independent was this realization that she loved to cook. And she had never been given the opportunity. Pearlie lived in a 24/7 staff program prior to becoming more independent. And she was never given the opportunity to cook and be involved in that process prior to her living on her own. And, you know, technology was put in place to know if somebody was cooking in the house and using the stove. And they didn't really think that she would, you know, be getting into that all that much, but they wanted just to make sure. They found out pretty quickly that Pearlie loved to cook. The sensor was going off all the time, alerting them that somebody was cooking. And sure enough, she was, you know, baking cakes and making dinner and all kinds of things. And they had no idea. And so technology, in her instance, had to be adapted a little bit because what they thought was going to be the reality for Pearlie wasn't. And so they were actually even over supporting her with the technology and had to scale that back because they realized, hey, she really does love to cook. So we don't need to be alerted every time she starts cooking. Let's just look at the times when the stove is left on for an extended period of time, or she's not in the kitchen and the stove is on. But again, she was now given that opportunity to do something that she loves to do. And then finally, just talking about, you know, ways that health and safety can be addressed using technology. We talked about a few with David already, both from, you know, who's coming and going from his home and how is he accessing his medication. But also, you know, can we support individuals with chronic medical conditions? So if somebody has diabetes or a heart issue, can we integrate technology to know in real time what their blood sugar reading is, or what their blood pressure is, or has there been a big weight change, those kinds of things. So, and that can be done in a really simple way so that if an individual has the ability to take the reading, everything after that happens automatically. So if an individual can get on a scale, if they can put a blood pressure cuff on and have it, you know, process and take the reading, everything after that happens automatically. It's going to be transmitted automatically and analyzed automatically so that if it is outside of a predetermined range for that person, now somebody can be alerted to, again, provide that support just when it's needed, and also before it becomes a bigger problem. And then just looking at, you know, one of the studies that we've been involved in over the years, this study was done in Wisconsin, looking at 128 individuals who were supported with technology. And that study was really looking at the efficacy of technology in community supported living. So individuals who were using technology to be supported instead of having someone with them 24 hours a day. And so looking at that juxtaposition of technology with support or just staff support was really the purpose of this study. And what they found was for those 128 individuals, not only did they have much higher quality of life and satisfaction results in the surveys that they conducted, but they were also able to save almost $1.8 million annually for just supporting those 128 individuals. And they also found a 72% reduction year to year in hospitalizations and emergency detentions with having less staff support and using technology in lieu of that. So as you start to go down this technology journey, these are some of the important questions to ask, you know, for individuals that you might think could benefit from the use of technology. You know, just thinking about, would this person be able to have opportunities to be alone and be independent? Also thinking about what are their priorities and outcomes. We actually have another video for a gentleman named Steve who we support in New York. And when we were talking to some members of his care team, and they were talking about the process for Steve's utilization of technology, one of the things that they mentioned was the fact that prior to very recently, the one thing that was missing from the planning process and determining what support Steve needed was Steve. It was a group of people who were making decisions about Steve's life, and Steve wasn't involved. And so really understanding what that individual wants in their life is a really important first step. As you start to look at, can technology be a viable option? And then, once you get to that level, understanding what technology is going to be appropriate and how is it going to work and who do you need to involve in that technology process? And also, how's that technology going to integrate in with the support that that person already has? Are we going to be able to change that support? Sometimes that happens pretty quickly. Other times we see that, nothing really changes for a while. Or, technology is going to be used to even, like Sabrina was talking about, to maintain where we are. So just because technology is being used doesn't mean that the supports that that individual is going to be receiving has to change immediately overnight. Sometimes it's an evolution where, everything's going to be the same today, and maybe we're working to a point 3 or 6 months from now where technology can play a bigger role in the support that person receives. And then finally, looking at what the process is. So again, this isn't go buy a piece of technology off the shelf and throw it in. It really has to be a thoughtful process based on an assessment. So just like any other type of support that someone's going to be receiving, it starts with an assessment to understand what the needs and goals and priorities and home environment and all those important factors are for the person you're supporting, so that that custom solution can be developed for that individual. And that all has to be considered before the first piece of technology is ever put in place. But once that's done, then the technology gets implemented and activated. And that's where that process really evolves of, okay, how are we going to, if at all, change the support that this person is going to receive? But also understanding the fact that, this isn't a static process. It isn't, set it and forget it. It's, a lot of times we see the fact that the technology is going to be getting us information that is different from what we thought. And so maybe we need to adapt and change the technology a month in, 3 months in, a year from now, based off of having more accurate and reliable information about what's really happening. Or maybe somebody has progressed and has really reached the goals. A gentleman that we support named Dakota, he was supported with a medication dispenser originally. And the medication dispenser would go off and alert him it was time to take his medications. And after about 1.5 years, 2 years, his support team realized that he was never missing his medications anymore. He was 100% compliant all the time, going and accessing his medications on time. So they were able to actually scale back his use of technology. And they went to him just getting a reminder alert on his cell phone that it's, hey, it's time for you to take your medication. And he was able to then have it organized a little bit differently. And he was taking on a more active role. And he was able to progress through some of his goals, and technology was, scaled back through that process. So it's not a static process. It's one that definitely evolves. So, at this time, certainly want to open up the floor to any questions that you guys might have. Again, feel free to drop those in the chat window. Certainly want to thank you all for, again, taking an hour out of your busy schedules to join us and hear a little bit more about enabling technology, and also learn a little bit more about FeelSafe and Sabrina and Henry and Ron, the folks that are right in your backyard in Alaska, who can help provide that support for you however you need it. But at this time, certainly any questions that you have, feel free to ask those. And if not, we'll wrap it up, but we'll give everybody a minute. If you have a question, feel free to go ahead and get that in. And also on the screen, I'm going to put it back up here in just a second. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop it in the chat box down here. I'm going to put in Sabrina's email address. So if you have any questions or just wondering, hey, how could this type of technology benefit someone that I support, feel free to reach out to Sabrina. I'm also going to put our website in there. Go to our website. We have a ton of resources and frequently asked questions. We have a very extensive YouTube channel. So feel free to check that out. If you follow us on social media, we're all the time posting great stories and examples of ways that technology can benefit individuals in different ways. So feel free to check out any of those resources, and also drop Sabrina a note as well. And again, thank you all for joining us today. And doesn't look like we have any other questions, but you know, again, wait, we do have a question coming in. Hang on one second. So the question is, would there be a device to sound an alert if someone becomes too loud in their home? Maybe once the volume reaches a certain decibel from a TV, video games, etc., when people are singing. Let me think. I don't know anything that's readily available that does that specifically. Yeah, to help reduce complaints from neighbors. So I don't know, Henry or Sabrina, you mentioned the fact that you had kind of a similar situation with the person that you were describing. Do you have any thoughts on that?
We didn't. We more use sensors to eliminate some of the things he was doing that was making noise. I haven't come across that particular question, but I know there's like off-the-shelf decibel meters. So I don't know if there would be something that we could find that would send an alert out. That would be the only question. But I know like there's even apps on your phone you could get with decibel meters. So that would be an interesting thing to research. If you want to go ahead and email Sabrina, we could possibly look into a solution for that for you, certainly.
It's a great idea, Henry. All right, guys. Well, again, Sabrina's email address and SimplyHome's website are in the chat box. So feel free to, again, reach out directly to Sabrina, go to our website, go to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media. Those are all great resources to learn more about technology, how it might benefit people that you support or people that you might know. And again, thank you all for your time and attention today. And we look forward to hopefully hearing from you again soon. So thanks a lot.